in the old wing of a large city hospital in a major Asian metropolis on the 13th floor. This area was originally dedicated to long-term and palliative care patients, but with the recent construction of a modern medical building, the usage rate of the 13th floor significantly decreased, leaving many wards empty with only a handful still in use. Consequently, during the night shifts, the 13th floor was always filled with a chilling and desolate atmosphere. Chun Ying, a senior nurse with 8 years of experience at this hospital. She had witnessed countless partings of life and death, and had become immune to the various ghost stories circulating in the hospital. However, over the past month, a certain phenomenon on the 13th floor began to make her feel an unprecedented sense of unease. Every night after the midnight shift change, Chun Ying would consistently see an empty wheelchair at the end of the hallway, near the entrance to a disused storage room. This particular wheelchair was among the oldest in the hospital. Its metal armrests were shiny from years of wear, and the seat cushion was tattered. The strangest thing was that it was never locked, showed no signs of recent use, yet it would always appear in that fixed spot, facing down the long corridor. Initially, Chun Ying thought it was left there carelessly by a cleaner or colleague, so she would push it back to the wheelchair parking area. But the next night, and the night after that, and indeed every subsequent night shift, the wheelchair would reappear in the exact same spot. No matter how much effort she put into pushing it back to the nursing station, or locking it in the storage room the night before, it would always return to the end of the corridor after midnight. Furthermore, each time she saw it, Chun Ying felt a faint, indescribable damp and decaying smell on the seat cushion, like the musty odor of old clothes left in a humid environment for too long. Other night shift colleagues also began to notice this phenomenon, but most simply shrugged it off, attributing it to old things in hospitals having a mind of their own. However, Chun Ying couldn't explain it away so easily. On one occasion, she intentionally locked the wheelchair inside Ward 1301, a long vacant room, before her shift ended, and sealed the door with tape. The next morning, when she checked out of curiosity before leaving, the tape on the door was intact, but the wheelchair was gone. At midnight, it was precisely back at the end of the corridor, facing down the hallway, as if a silent sentinel. Chun Ying began to feel a chill. She no longer touched the wheelchair, only observing it from a distance. It was like an abandoned old toy, moving on its own in the dead of night. She reviewed the historical archives of the 13th floor and discovered that it had once been the hospital's intensive care unit, housing many terminally ill patients. In the old files, she found a record about a long bedridden elderly woman named Lin Yu, who had lived on the 13th floor for nearly 3 years, due suffering from a rare degenerative neurological disease. By the end of her life, she was completely unable to speak or move, relying solely on a wheelchair for brief strolls down the corridor. Her medical record mentioned that Lin Yu was heavily dependent on that wheelchair, almost inseparable from it, as it was her only way to move, and the date of her passing was precisely on an autumn night 30 years ago. Chun Ying felt a shiver. Could this wheelchair be connected to this elderly woman, Lin Yu? When it appeared facing the corridor each time, was it waiting for something? Or searching for something? She began to examine the wheelchair closely, and noticed that on the inside of an armrest, there appeared to be several blurred Chinese characters, carved with a knife, as if telling an unfinished story. The marks were faded and almost illegible. Chun Ying's heart raced. She felt an invisible force communicating through this old wheelchair, telling a forgotten story of waiting in the silent depths of the hospital night. That night, as Chun Ying was organizing documents at the nursing station, she inadvertently glanced at the surveillance monitor. The image of the 13th floor hallway was silent, but at the end of the corridor, next to the wheelchair, she saw a faint, translucent figure. It was an elderly woman with white hair, dressed in a faded patient gown. She slowly bent down and gently touched the armrest of the wheelchair. Then she slowly sat down. However, as her body made contact with the cushion, she merely passed through it. Finally, with an extremely slow motion, she settled into the wheelchair, as if returning to its most familiar home. Chun Ying's hands froze on the keyboard. Her pupils suddenly dilated. She couldn't believe her eyes. When she looked at the screen again, the figure had vanished, leaving only the empty wheelchair, quietly parked there, facing the corridor, as if waiting for something, or perhaps it had already found what it was waiting for. After witnessing that scene on the surveillance monitor, Chun Ying was consumed by extreme fear. She began to believe that this wheelchair was not merely an old object that moved on its own. It harbored a trapped soul, and that soul was none other than the elderly woman Lin Yu, who had passed away on the 13th floor 30 years ago. She re-examined Lin Yu's medical records and discovered a crucial detail. A month before her death, Lin Yu had repeatedly complained to the nurses that she felt trapped, unable to move, and that something was waiting for her at the end of the corridor. The night Lin Yu passed away was also marked by a thunderstorm. The night shift nurse's report mentioned that she had repeatedly heard moving and bumping sounds from Lin Yu's ward, but each time she went to check, she found Lin Yu lying quietly in bed. The night nurse thought it was a hallucination caused by fatigue, until she discovered Lin Yu had passed away the following morning. Chun Ying connected all these pieces, and a chilling truth gradually emerged. Perhaps Lin Yu, even in life, had been tormented by something unseen, and her strong obsession with moving and waiting had trapped her soul forever within that wheelchair and that corridor. Chun Ying felt an invisible pressure. She knew she could no longer ignore this wheelchair. She decided to use a break during her night shift to investigate further. This time, she wouldn't rely solely on her eyesight. She took out a small night vision camera, hid it in a blind spot at the nursing station, and aimed it at the wheelchair. She also sprinkled some fine white powder, a non-toxic powder used by the hospital to detect pests around the wheelchair, hoping to track any unusual traces. Late at night, as the corridor fell silent again, Chun Ying returned to the nursing station, her heart pounding. She observed the wheelchair through the camera's night vision. In the frame, the wheelchair sat quietly. Around 2:40 a.m., a slight tremor appeared in the footage. The wheelchair's armrest seemed to be gently touched by an invisible hand. Subsequently, the wheelchair began to move slowly, without a sound, without any push. It glided as if controlled by an unseen driver, slowly moving towards the other end of the corridor, stopping at the door of Ward 1303. Ward 1303 housed an elderly patient, Li Biao, who had been in a long-term coma for many years. His family visited almost every night and played soft music by his bedside. The wheelchair stopped at the door of Ward 1303 for about 10 minutes, then slowly glided back to its original position at the end of the corridor. Chun Ying examined the white powder around the wheelchair and found a string of extremely faint, almost invisible tiny traces on the floor, as if someone had walked barefoot, but each step was very light, leaving almost no pressure. Chun Ying felt a shiver run down her spine. This was not simply movement. It was a purposeful action. Why did the wheelchair stop at the door of Ward 1303? She reviewed Li Bo's medical records and discovered that Li Biao and Lin Yu were admitted at roughly the same time and had been ward neighbors. According to nursing records, they had worked together in the same factory when they were younger, making them old acquaintances. Since Lin Yu had difficulty moving in her later life, Li Biao often had his visiting family discreetly give her small snacks or handwritten cards to encourage her. Lin Yu greatly appreciated Li Bo's kindness. Chun Ying also found a note in Lin Yu's medical records. Lin Yu had once told a nurse that what she most wanted was a cup of water personally handed to her by Li Biao in her sickbed, because Li Biao had always been very kind to her, like family. But this wish was never fulfilled. This discovery brought a sudden clarity to Chun Ying, yet also immense sadness. It turned out that Lin Yu's obsession was not just movement, but a waiting for an unfinished friendship and an unfulfilled wish. That wheelchair carried her longing for Li Biao. Each midnight stroll was her attempt to get closer to him. And each time she faced the corridor, perhaps she was waiting for Li Biao to bring her warmth as he used to. That night, Chun Ying returned to the nursing station again and restarted the camera. At 2:40 a.m., the wheelchair slowly began to move once more. This time, Chun Ying didn't just watch the screen. She decided to walk into the corridor herself. She saw the wheelchair, as if alive, slowly gliding towards Ward 1303. As it stopped at the door, Chun Ying gently walked beside it and noticed that the carvings on the wheelchair's armrest appeared clearer than before. Chun Ying felt an invisible sorrow. She softly spoke to the empty wheelchair, or rather, to Lin Yu's spirit. "Grandma Lin, Uncle Li is still inside. He's always been here. He hasn't forgotten you." She felt that the damp and decaying smell in the air seemed to become stronger at that moment, but also carried an indescribable hint of comfort. She gently pushed open the door to Ward 1303. Li Biao lay quietly in bed, soft music playing by his bedside. Chun Ying gently pushed the wheelchair to Li Biao's bedside, facing him. She knew this was perhaps where Lin Yu most wished to be. Chun Ying pushed the wheelchair to Li Biao's bedside, letting it sit quietly there, facing him. She felt that the air around seemed a bit different at that moment. While the unsettling coldness hadn't completely vanished, it was now tinged with an indescribable peace. She left the ward, returned to the nursing station, and looked at the surveillance monitor again. The 13th floor corridor remained empty, but the wheelchair was now quietly parked inside Ward 1303, no longer at the end of the corridor. Time passed minute by minute, and the midnight silence once again enveloped the hospital. The next morning, when Chun Ying handed over her shift, she didn't mention her experience from the night before to anyone. She simply went to Ward 1303 to check quietly. The old wheelchair was still parked by Li Biao's bedside, its cushions still carrying that faint, damp, musty smell. But this time, the carvings on the armrest seemed clearer, as if the person who carved them had finally found peace. From that day on, the wheelchair never reappeared at the end of the 13th floor corridor. It remained quietly parked inside Ward 1303, accompanying the long comatose Li Biao. When the nurses discovered the wheelchair, they simply classified it as patient's personal property, as Li Biao's family had previously expressed willingness to prepare a wheelchair for his potential future rehabilitation. Thus, this ancient wheelchair became a part of Li Biao's ward. No one ever moved it again, nor did anyone discuss its strange self-moving phenomenon. However, the story didn't quite end there. While Chun Ying outwardly returned to normal, deep within her, she gained a more complex understanding of the hospital as a space. Occasionally, during night shifts, when passing by the door of Ward 1303, she would feel an unusual warmth rather than coldness. She would sometimes still smell that damp, earthy odor, but this time it was mixed with a faint floral scent, an aroma that brought comfort rather than fear. She knew that Lin Yu's obsession had not entirely vanished. It had merely transformed from an uneasy wandering into a quiet companionship. Lin Yu had finally waited for the person she longed for, and the wheelchair, too, had finally found its true home. For Chun Ying, this unsolved mystery of the 13th floor was no longer just a simple ghost story, but an unexplained mystery about deep longing and an unfinished friendship. Chun Ying still walks the hospital corridors every day, caring for patients of all kinds. She sees the busy figures of nurses, rushing between wards, handling various emergencies, and facing the anxiety and needs of patients and their families. Their work is full of pressure and challenges, where every second can relate to the safety of a life. Chun Ying understands all of this deeply and appreciates the heavy burden nurses carry. She thinks of Lin Yu and her obsession with friendship and waiting. She also thinks of many other patients who silently endure pain in the hospital, and the nurses who tirelessly dedicate themselves to them day and night. Hospitals are not just places for healing. They also carry countless joys and sorrows, serving as a crossroads for life stories. In these silent corners, perhaps many obsessions and stories, which we cannot see or understand, are hidden. And nurses, besides facing illness and death, sometimes have to confront these invisible echoes. They endure immense physical and psychological pressure, yet they remain steadfast in their duties, safeguarding the light of life with professionalism and tenderness. So next time you see a tired nurse in a hospital, please give them more understanding and patience. They might have just been through a life and death rescue, or dealt with a series of difficult situations. They put in their best efforts every day, and even when faced with obsessions and echoes we cannot see, they still stand firm in their duties. They are truly busy and work very hard. Please give them more consideration and respect, because with their professionalism and love, they uphold the light of life.